LGBTQ+ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer, and then the plus encompasses all the other identities that people can have. And it basically just is an umbrella for anything other than sort of straight and cisgender, and it provides a community for all those people to come together and find other people like them, and feel sort of pride for who they are and what they identify as.
My interest in this project has come through some research I've been doing. So I've been talking to many youngsters in secondary schools who identify as LGBTQ+, and what I've been trying to understand is what their experiences are like. And unfortunately, what I often hear as I go around schools is a lot of negative experiences, a lot of challenges and a lot of problems for these youngsters. Some of the stories are actually quite heartbreaking. I remember sitting in an interview with a group of students and sat next to a trans boy and just noticing his arms were just covered in cuts. Recently I've been talking to other children who vary their routes to and from school purely to avoid difficulties with other youngsters that they're going to encounter. And these are not isolated incidents. And so there's a genuine concern about how these young people are coping with school. And there's a real sense that they feel isolated. And we know there are problems that isolation also leads to mental health issues. And if these aren't dealt with and not addressed properly, they can become sort of like lifelong issues. It sort of works on two levels. One is actually helping the young people themselves feel accepted and normal. But there's also an issue around their peers and actually how they interact with them and how they see them and how they understand them. For a lot of youngsters who identify as lesbian, gay or bisexual, they are often talking about, year 4 or 5, they started to question these things. Those who identify more as transgender, they were quite often from a very young age realising that they didn't quite fit into the way society operates. And so bringing all these issues together, the idea was to help primary schools and both parents and teachers within primary schools start to have conversations about these sorts of issues, both for those who may be exploring their identity, but also for those for whom they are heteronormal, or they're just cisgender, who are not going to have these sorts of challenges or experiences, but actually are going to be encountering these people and have a big impact on how their lives work. In some ways, by the time you get to secondary school, it's too late to sort of like have these sorts of conversations because ideas and attitudes and values are starting to be a bit ingrained. So what we wanted to do is sort of open up these conversations early on to help both those children who start to explore their identities in these sorts of areas, but also for those who don't, so that they can become much more understanding, much more aware, and actually much more accepting of everything. So that's really what the impetus for the project was.
So I think children begin to sort of internalise opinions based on what they see and hear around them, especially based on what the adults in their lives think, because for children that's sort of the most important thing. So addressing these sorts of topics early really helps normalise them, create awareness, and make sure that children don't end up seeing it as some sort of other identity or something weird and strange and unknown. So if the adults in their life treat it as normal, then hopefully that'll mean children see it as normal as well. And if they grow up and start to explore and find that this is who they are, they don't feel sort of alienated or confused because they've never been taught about it.
When I was in primary school, I didn't have the greatest experiences when it came to education in general, really. So I went to a Christian school and I was taught about real issues really early on in my life, but in a negative light. So I don't really have the most positive outlook on life, I guess, and that started out when I was really young, and I wish I had just had a more accepting environment and people that cared about the education I was receiving and not just pushing different ideologies on me when I was a kid. And there was an incident where I kissed a girl and I got in a lot of trouble. And later that day we had a Bible study class and they really emphasized on premarital sex and gay marriage, and if you do both those things, you're gonna go to hell. And so when I was 8 years old, I was taught that, and I thought I was gonna go to hell. So telling a kid that is really traumatizing, and I really resented myself from a young age. Sorry.
Do you want to take a break?
No, I'm good. Yeah.
When I was in primary school, I wish someone had talked to me about this topic. So later in life, I had a better understanding on what it meant, and I wasn't afraid of that. I kind of wish my parents knew how to guide me through discovering my sexuality. So I identify as a bisexual woman, and I didn't have anyone that knew what that was like or what that looked like. So I did struggle a lot during high school because I didn't have any TV shows to help me throughout the process of discovering myself. I didn't have any family member that could help me out, or any teacher, anything at all. So I wish someone had explained to me, like it's okay to love women and men.
If you don't talk to your kids about LGBTQ plus topics, or if you talk about them in a negative way, they're going to see that, and they're going to be able to understand whether or not they'll feel comfortable talking to you about these issues. And if they do, maybe that's because they were spoken about kind of all the time and in schools as well. But if they're not, and they're often avoided, they're just not going to really talk to you about those things, and they'd rather just kind of keep to themselves.
I think in my personal experience, one of the most difficult things as well was then talking to my parents about what I was exploring and what I was feeling. And that was because we hadn't opened that sort of channel of communication when I was younger and spoken about these sorts of topics. So I think that's a very important thing. If you want your child to feel comfortable and safe to come talk to you when they are going through these things, or even if just they have questions, then you need to start when they're young and start talking about these topics and reassuring them that they're not going to be judged if they come and speak to you about these things, that you're a safe person to talk to. So really encouraging them to ask questions and come to you rather than maybe just seeking help on the internet, because then you don't know what sort of information they're going to encounter. So just making sure that you are a trusted person in their life for them to come to. And then when they get older and they might be going through something like this or exploring who they are, and they need some help, they know they can come to you rather than feeling unsafe and isolated and just having to sort of battle it themselves, which I think is what a lot of people, and definitely myself, went through.
So one of my key research interests lies with working in partnership with parents, because I really believe in the importance of parents and how much they can positively impact their children's lives, experiences, including education. So parents are the key aspect of a child's life when growing up. And I guess my involvement in this project links to that. So we wanted to work with parents and teachers from our local primary schools and some of our students at the university who identify as LGBTQ+, to work together really and try and find solutions and develop approaches about how adults can help children safely explore ideas around LGBTQ+, because what we've realized is that there's not really much out there for parents and teachers about how to approach these topics in a safe and natural way with all children. So there is some materials about how to help your child if they do identify as LGBTQ+, but there's not really much out there about how you can have conversations with all the children in your classroom as a teacher, or just with your children as a parent. So we really wanted to address that, and we wanted to do that by working together with those people that have had these experiences and with those people that work with children on a daily basis.